In this very unstable economic climate, never has it been more important to get value for money, and particularly in golf equipment. But if you're shopping at the cheaper end of the driver market, do you know what you're missing out on? Or are you missing out on anything at all? Is it just marketing? Well, I've got with me two drivers today. I've got the Ping G430 Max 10K driver and the MacGregor V-Max driver, so I'm going to put them through their paces and find out. So for context, these drivers are over £450 apart in their original retail value. The Max 10K came in at $599.99 and the MacGregor just at $129.99. So to caveat this video at the start, I'm probably not claiming that the MacGregor is going to compete or is going to be a superior driver to the Ping. I think even MacGregor would admit that it's going to have some pitfalls and some downfalls versus its kind of more expensive opposition here. But it's more of a pound for pound race. Think if Tyson Fury were to fight Floyd Mayweather, that probably wouldn't be a fair fight either. But that doesn't mean that Floyd Mayweather isn't as skilled as Tyson Fury, just bigger. And that's, I guess, what I'm talking about in terms of the research and development and money that goes into these drivers. So I want to see whether pound for pound the MacGregor V-Max can keep up with this very expensive competitor. So first of all, I wanted to talk about the looks, because that's really important, right? You have to like what you're looking down on in driver. And I think it'd be fair to say both of them have a somewhat fussy aesthetic, dare I say it. So first, looking at the Ping, we've got the carbon fly wrap crown that we know serves a really good technical purpose, which I'll talk about in a moment. And that gives a very premium feel. Just the look of carbon, even if it's just carbon effect sometimes, really does elevate a product for me. We've got quite a lot of interesting topography, if you like. The shapes and the contours on the crown really offer something visually, and the turbulators at the front, although they do divide opinion, some people, they serve a purpose. But there is quite a lot going on the crown of the Ping. When I look at the MacGregor, it's a little simpler in terms of its crown makeup. So it's just a pure matte black painted finish there. We've got some red border strips around the outside, just to give you the impression of the footprint. There's dots and stripes there. I don't know if both were necessarily needed. From a head profile point of view, it's slightly unorthodox. It definitely looks a little bit smaller than the Max 10K, but so does pretty much everything on the market, to be perfectly honest. It's slightly onset. The leading edge is set a little bit ahead of where the shaft enters there, and the top edge is really, really straight. But overall, I quite like the aesthetic from the playing position. It's pretty good. For $129.99, I think that's pretty impressive. And then when you look at the soles, I think this is where the Ping starts to elevate itself. From a shelf appeal point of view, the branding and the lines are just a little bit neater and a little bit more sophisticated to my eye. That said, the MacGregor, I like the colours and I like the heavy branding. If I was being really fussy, some of the paintwork could be a little bit neater. But like I said, maybe I am being fussy there for $129.99. On to the features and the technology, and I think it's probably fair to say this is where the Ping maybe starts to separate itself a little bit from a cheaper competition. So this is packed with features. I've done a lot of work with this driver. So the first thing Ping did with this is they squashed it down vertically so they could increase the footprint and push that weight wider around the perimeter of the club for forgiveness. Also, again, on the forgiveness story, we've got this heavy back weight which draws weight away, moves that CG and increases the MOI, so you can hit it more places across the face and still get some decent results. As I've discussed from the looks, we've already got that carbon fly wrap crown, but that serves a technical purpose as well. We're removing weight from the crown so we can push that, redistribute it around the club, again, to make it more and more forgiving. We've also got an adjustable hosel so we can change loft and adversely lie angle as well. So there's an awful lot going on from a technology and a features point of view with the Ping driver. When you get into the MacGregor, the story is not quite as extensive. It's 460 cc's, all titanium head, and then we just start to get some more ambiguous terms like ultra slim face and extended sweet spot, with no real sort of technical explanation for how those things have been achieved. It seems to be more of a claim than an actual science and actual facts. But are they claims? Is the Ping even doing what it's supposed to do? We're just reading off a manual here at the moment, really, so let's hit some balls, let's take some data, and let's delve into the performance a bit. So let's take a look at the performance. I'm here at the beautiful Stoke Park Golf Club. I've got my full swing kit launch monitor. So I want to hit a few away and start to see some patterns, start to see some numbers and see what I get. So I'm just going to hit a couple away now just to give the initial impressions of kind of feel and sound, etc. I have tested this driver before, so I know what's coming. But in behind the ball, I actually don't hate the look of it at all. It's got a nice deep face, nice and confidence inspiring. And that's a lovely straight flight. I hope you picked up on audio. It's quite loud. It's got quite a hollow, tinny sensation, but truth be told, it actually feels very solid. Let me just get that ball on the tee peg would help. Okay, so once again, 129.99, I remind you here. That actually does look really good in behind the ball. And that branding on the top that I spoke about, that may be a little bit excessive, that V-Max, it's actually very useful. It's kind of like it's almost like a bigger version of the Callaway triangle that sits at the front. I do quite like that. And looking at the numbers on there, that wasn't too bad. We'll delve into that in a minute. Very similar. Maybe 5 or 10 yards left of the first one. Decent-ish numbers again. That was a little bit off the heel, so maybe there's a forgiveness story there to talk about. I'm just going to hit a couple away with a ping, just to get me some bass feels, so I know what I'm talking about. Straight away, it's very different. That bigger footprint of the ping in behind the ball there, yeah, it's very noticeable. It does feel shallower, which is interesting. So let's hit a couple away and see where we are. Noticeably lower spin. It just felt a little bit more meaty at strike. It was slightly more muted sound, and that's something that's not always said about pings. Probably the G430 Max 10K is arguably at the louder end of the spectrum from what's been available of the major OEM drivers this year. So interesting that even that's more muted than the MacGregor there. Let's go again. Yeah, that's on the button. Right down the middle, really solid feel. Very much reminding me why I gave this driver 5 stars in its first review. So that's an interesting first little look for me. Just glancing at the numbers, there might be a story to tell here. I'm going to hit a few more, gather some real data over a few more shots, and I'll get back to you. Well, that was really interesting as an experiment. And again, I need to caveat this. I'm going to give you some information that's going to make it seem like the MacGregor's a bad product. It is not. The Ping G430 Max 10K is an excellent product. We know it's going to outperform it. I've already said that, but I'm just interested to see how much. So in terms of the unquantifiables that we've kind of alluded to already there, I very much did prefer the sound of the Ping driver. It's a little bit more muted. It's not quite as tinny and offensive as the MacGregor V-Max sounded there, but the feel wasn't massively different aside from the acoustic. So in terms of those unquantifiables, the immeasurable stuff that's not data that I'm going to talk about here, they weren't worlds apart. It was just slightly louder, the MacGregor. Onto the data, and then things do start to separate a little bit more. So from the MacGregor, I was getting a reasonable carry for me off my club head speed of around 116. I was carrying it on average about 263 there. Spin was quite high. Now for context, I tried to get them set up at the same loft. They're both about at the 10.5 degree mark. But the shaft that came in the MacGregor driver for me is a little bit soft, so I would expect to see a little bit more spin. So that was spinning on average around the 3.5, just above 3,500 mark. So it had quite a steep descent angle, and that maybe compromised its carry a little bit there. In terms of ball speed, mid to late 160s was okay, but it's certainly on the lower end of what I would expect. But as I keep saying, 129.99. Now the ping driver did perform a lot better. So I was getting an average carry there of kind of 285. Spin was significantly less, around the 2004, 2500 mark. And the ball speed was pushing 170 and creeping just over 170 off a very similar club head speed input. So again, undoubtedly the ping is a superior product, but quite honestly, with that massive price difference in mind, I thought the gap might be even larger than it actually was. So the MacGregor driver there has surprised me in terms of performance. Something to think about. Well, that was really interesting. Some really interesting shots, some really interesting data. And I think we can be left in no doubt that the ping is the superior driver. But we knew that to start with, right? I was under no illusions. I was not suggesting that the MacGregor could necessarily keep up in terms of performance. The ping was going further, it was spinning less, it was slightly more forgiving, and it looked a bit more premium overall. The real experiment here was to see whether pound for pound there was any value in the MacGregor V-Max. And when you think that this is 460% more expensive, was I seeing a 460% performance gain? I don't think I was. It was significant. There was more yardage and all the things I've spoken about, but I don't think it equates percentage value to percentage performance. So in summary there, if you are a price conscious golfer who you're not totally concerned with fully optimizing your performance, there is some good value to be had out there. And for $129.99, this MacGregor V-Max would do you a really good job. There are also other options. If you're not looking necessarily to enter the new golf club market, partners of ours like Golf Clubs for Cash do some fantastic pre-loved used equipment, so you can still stick with a big name brand, a big name OEM, but maybe go back a few generations to maintain that level of performance, but without having to break the bank. So there is some good value to be had. You've just got to look for it.